So, very warm welcome to all of you. I hope all of you can see and hear me clearly. So, before I begin the session, I would like to know from each of you, whoever is present, to please confirm whether you can see and hear me clearly. Things should not be much of a problem, but in any case, if there's any problem with the video and the audio, let's get it corrected right at the outset. And by the way, I hope all of you are familiar with what we're going to take up today. As of now, nobody has responded. I would be waiting for 10-20 seconds to quickly confirm. In the meantime, let me tell you about this session. In this session, as you can see in the title, what we are doing is very simple. We are going to look at increasing our score in VA and RC with previous year question papers. So in short, what we are going to do is we will discuss CAT 2018, the first shift, the English section of it. Of course, there were 34 questions. We will not be able to do all of it in one go. I will pick up the first two passages, 10 questions. So the entire 2018 Shift 1 English section will be covered in 3 parts, right? So all of you know the agenda. This is what we are going to take up today, right? And by the way, as I already told you, I'll be looking at 2 RC passages. I will pick up the first 2. By the way, when I say first, there's not much of a meaning in it, because most people will have different versions, in the sense that the passages will be the same, but the order could be rearranged, the questions, the order would be rearranged. It would be all different, if not for all, would be very different for for most of the people, right? So I hope all of you can see and hear me clearly. As I was telling in the beginning, if it is a trouble, if the audio is a little bit low, people who are watching the session live, people who are watching it on their mobiles and laptops might find the volume a little bit low. So in such a case, it's mostly because of the device. Use a headphone or a earphone and increase the volume, right? So without wasting much of a time, let me quickly tell you about something that you already know about. Something that you probably have already heard about, super subscription. This is nothing else but a subscription which gives you unlimited access to all structured live courses and mock tests. When I say unlimited, unlimited access to structured live courses, I mean for not just for courses which are meant for CAT, but for other MBA entrance exams also. So this will enable you to look at all the courses, right? So that way you will be able to make the most of every course, right? And the subscription period is 3, 6 and 18 months. This is according to your suitability, according to your liking, right? And as I was telling you, this is the first passage. And by the way, the best approach here is, before, if you notice, right, this is like 1, 2, 3, 4 slides. It looks like long, but each slide will not contain more than 100 words, right? You can see in one slide, in a particular slide in a PPT, I have to basically increase the font. I have to make the entire thing big enough. So this is 1 paragraph per slide. And the best thing to do would be, before looking at the passage, quickly scan the questions. Which of the following would the author most strongly support? Something like critical reasoning. So it will have to have understanding, right? Which of the following can be inferred? So again, not going to be very easy. The author lists all of the following as negative effects of the use of. So this is a database question. So for this question, you might require to go back and refer, right? So, and the fourth passage, right, he is asking you about the reference, right, the meaning of a particular phrase. So this will be again related to a particular part, right? And again, the fifth question is something which is related to a particular part. So what do I realize? If you notice, what I'm telling you is very simple, right? Before actually reading the passage, spend 10-20 seconds scanning the questions. And when I scan the questions, I did not read the answer options. How does it help? For example, in this first passage, we realize out of 5 questions, 3 of them would be related to a particular part of the passage or particular parts of the passage. So it would help if you pay more attention to that. That is it, right? So now I will give you 1 minute to read this slide. And by the way, if you look at it, if you notice, there are 24 questions, right, in the English section. So 24 questions in the sorry in passages. In English would be total of 34, of which 24 was from RC. So these are the first 10 questions. So per passage you will get roughly around around 7 minutes, right? So roughly around 7 minutes for the whole passage. So reading will take you 3-4 minutes, right? Probably 3 to 4 minutes, and answering the questions another 3-4 minutes, right? So that is what we have to be keeping in mind. So this is the first passage. I will ask you to focus, and if you notice, right, so the worst thing, so the lie, there was a question based on what was the lie, so you can easily understand it, from there, right? And the question about that particular phrase is here: recycling is to save the earth what hammering a nail is to halting a falling skyscraper. So of course you will not just read this part, you will have to look at the overall impact, you'll have to look at the overall passage as such, right? But this should actually help you understand the passage. So I hope all of you have read it. Now if you notice, when you have read this particular part, right, if you notice, right, so what the author is actually telling you is that he is saying that recycling is not the problem to the solution. In fact, he says the problem is larger than this, right? So the problem is, this is something which is larger, right? Now, and towards the end of the paragraph, you see, encouraging individuals to recycle more will never solve the problem of a massive production that should have been avoided in the first place. So the problem, according to him, is the massive production of single-use plastic, right? And not, and not the use of it. So the problem is the production. So here you get an inkling as to what he's trying to tell you, right? So he's trying to tell you that, probably as we read ahead, we can probably confirm it. What he's trying to hint at is the fact that the blame is shifted, is probably in the production, not in the demand. Let's see. Let's read the next slide. This next slide is very short. I expect all of you to read it in a very short time. Right, so here he is highlighting in this passage, if you notice in this particular slide, he is highlighting the problems of, he is highlighting the problems created by plastic. So I have had a disturbing window into the accumulating literature, so the hazards of plastic pollution, right? So he is speaking about the problems of plastic pollution. Okay, everybody would probably, and there was a question which was asked also, if you remember, about how, what are the ill effects of plastic that the author mentions. So that would definitely also help. Okay, everybody's read it, I hope. Right, let me look at it. This is where, if you notice, in the first paragraph, he was highlighting the problem and the solution that most people try to project. And he's saying it's not enough because the problem is not that. The problem is actually deeper. And here, if you look at this slide, you will understand that he begins highlighting what is the actual problem. So as you read, you will see, right? So he highlights the example of this Keep America Beautiful, and he says its mission was to educate and encourage environmental stewardship. Is nothing else but when you try to protect and nurture, especially. So according to him, pay attention to this line. These efforts seem benevolent, but they obscure the real problem. The real problem is what the corporate polluters play in the plastic problem. This for him is the real problem. Add to this where he says that, it is the production that should never have been done in the first place. So the major problem is not in the users, right? The users, the problem is in the people who produce them, the technology. It's the misuse of the technology, or rather people who produce it, people who make plastic. Right. So if you notice words like this, when he says this clever misdirection, when he says misdirection, of course, he means, you are deflecting the attention from the actual problem to something else. The actual problem is this, and they have succeeded in, uh, they have succeeded in, to some extent, succeeded in highlighting, or rather deflecting shifting the attention, right, to something else, right. So that is to shift the public focus to consumer recycling behavior and actively thwarted legislation that would increase extended producer. So producer responsibility for waste management. So this is basically, if you look at it, right, so the idea is the greatest success has been to shift the onus of environmental responsibility to the public while simultaneously trusted name in the environmental movement. So what he's saying is that this movement succeeded in shifting the onus to the public, while the actual problem is the producers, are the corporate giants, right, are the corporates who produce it. All clear, everybody? Right, let's move on. So now he seems to come up with some problem, right, some solutions in the last slide. Let's see how it works out. So what can we do to make responsible use of plastic a reality? The first thing is reject the lie. Right, what is the lie? The lie was what was the lie? The deflection. The lie was telling people, right, fixing the blame on the consumers, not on the actual, propagators of plastic. So that is what is the lie, right? Litterbugs are people who litter, who spread garbage around, who litter, waste products, right? So he's saying they are the people who litter, or who throw away plastic, they are not responsible, right? So our huge problem with plastic is the result of a permissive legal network that has allowed the uncontrolled rise of, despite clear evidence, to harm that it causes. So recycling is not the problem according to him. So I think everybody has read it. I'll give you 20 seconds to wind up, then we will move on to the questions. And such thorough understanding, by the way, it took some time for us to read. This is because we are all doing it together. Otherwise, in the exam, when you read it alone, this should be done in 3 to 4 minutes. Maximum 4 minutes, could be done in 2.5 minutes also. Right. So, shall we look at the first question? Yes. And while answering the question, I would like you to remember 2-3 things. Number one, understand the question very carefully. Look for the demand of the question. The demand of the question should be met, also keeping in mind what is correct as per the passage. First thing. Second thing, eliminate the wrong answers. Elimination of things which are clearly wrong sometimes help you clarify things to a great extent, and sometimes you can even arrive at the answer by simple elimination also, right? So which of the following interventions would the author most strongly support? So what would he say? Completely banning all single-use plastic bags, right? This looks a little bit, if you read carefully, this will be a little bit of a problem, because when you say banning, see, according to him, the problem was not the consumers, problem was in the people who produced it. When you say banning, what do you mean? Do you mean banning of production, or banning of consuming? We do not know. So still slight bit of a doubt, right? What about B? Passing regulation targeted at producers that generate. This seems to be for him, the root cause of the problem were the people who were producing plastic, not the people who were consuming. So that way, this B is a much better option than A. Just to confirm, having all consumers change their plastic consumption habits, he says that this is not the problem. The people who are consuming or using the plastic is not the problem. The problem is the people who produced it. We read it at 2-3 places. Remember, I highlighted it. Right. So best answer here is B. Recycling all plastic debris. This is again not at all even relevant. Okay. Now let's look at the next question. It can be inferred that the author considers the Keep America Beautiful organization. So what does he think about Keep America Beautiful organization? Right. Now, what does he think? If you remember, if you want, I can show you. Right. What does he think about? Its mission was to educate and encourage. At face value, these efforts seem benevolent, but this is where it was a clever misdirection, shifting the focus from the corporate players to the public, right? So that was the first thing. That was that was what the author thinks about America, Beautiful America organization. It's a greenwash because it was a benevolent. If it on the face value it was benevolent, but was it actually a benevolent attempt to improve public recycling habits, or was it done to shift the blame from the producers, from the corporates to the public? So I would eliminate A because of this, right? Look at B. Sham. What is a sham? Sham basically means something which is a deception. So greenwash, right? By this term greenwash, he basically means to indicate something like a deception, right? So sham, okay, as it diverted attention away from the role of corporates. This is what the author wants to discuss. This is what the author has indicated, right? So this is the answer, right? It is not innovative, it is not positive, it is not important. He does not call it positive, he only calls it a deception or a lie, right? Now, third question, as I told you, this is a question which is based on data, right? So this is, so if first of all, try to answer it on the basis of memory retention. If you cannot, there's nothing wrong in referring to the part which is relevant. When I say referring to the part which is relevant, I do not mean reading the whole passage again. You have already read the passage, so you will know where does he list out the negative or negatives of plastic. He lists this out in the second paragraph, if you remember. This is where he lists out the hazards, right? So this is the paragraph where he highlights this, right? If you refer to it again, you can easily confirm and refer, right? If you let's look at the options also, right? Poisonous chemicals released into water and food, definitely, so it cannot be the answer. Adverse impacts on the digestive systems of animals exposed, he mentions consumption. Remember, if you notice, he says, look at it, right? So threats to wildlife through entanglement and consumption. So this basically means, this is the problem posed because of eating, right? So the eating by by animals. So this is also not the answer, right? So even see slow pace of degradation and non-degradation of plastic in the environment. This is something which also will be mentioned, if you notice, right? He says, right, if you notice, scientists have long recognized that plastics biodegrade slowly, if at all. That means they degrade very slowly if they degrade, which means it's too long that it is even almost the same as non-degrading, right? So even this cannot be the answer. Now, air pollution, he does not mention this, though you might know, this is and by the way, if you notice, the air pollution caused during the process of recycling plastics, right, not at all mentioned. So the answer is D, right? Everybody's clear with this, I hope. Let's move on to the next question, right? So in the second paragraph, the phrase what hammering a nail is to halting a falling skyscraper, right? So if you notice, this is the analogy that he takes to point out how recycling as a step, how successful, right? If you notice, if you want, I will show you that part again, right? So he says, right, recycling plastic is to saving the earth what hammering a nail is to halting a falling. If you read further, you will understand, right? This is where he throws the hint that the recycling is like a very, it's as it will be insufficient, utterly insufficient, right, to solve the problem, because the problem is something else, right? So let's see what should be the answer. Focusing on consumer behavior to tackle the problem of plastics. He does not say, देखो, focusing on what hammering to tackle the problem of plastics solution, right? So well, let's see, is it exactly that? Let's see if you notice, right? So where does he say this, right? If you want, I will, if you've already seen it, is it focusing on consumer behavior to tackle the problem of plastics pollution, right? So if you have read that part, you will make it very, you'll really understand, right? So the real problem, he mentions this real problem is single-use plastic, right? So is an incredibly reckless abuse of technology. This is the part. So this part tells me, if you notice, that the problem is is this, right? Focusing on single-use plastic to reduce the plastic's footprint. So he's saying this is the problem, right? So he says, I mean, it's like doing something very little to solve a larger problem. The larger problem is somewhere else. Okay, that is what is the case. Everybody is clear with this, I hope, right? Fifth question, I hope everybody will be able to answer without without uh, referring. If you want, you can refer, but still the idea should be you should try to answer on the basis of what you remember. So in the first paragraph, the author uses lie in order to, right, to refer to what the understatement of the effects of recycling. He is saying he is not speaking about the effects of recycling. He is telling you that the real problem is somewhere else, and we are given a solution that does not even target the problem, right? So if you look at it, blame assigned to consumers for indiscriminate use of plastic, very well possible, because this is what he was trying, right? So the lie is that we are responsible as consumers and not the producers, right? So people who produce. Understatement of the enormity, no, he does not. It is not understating the magnitude of the problem. It is completely highlighting the problem, shifting the focus. The real problem is somewhere else, and it is shifted to, the focus is shifted to something else. So eliminate C, right? So D is not even relevant. So the best answer to 5 is B, right? So we will try the same thing with the next passage. Now this time I will not actually show you, how to scan the questions. You will already know it, right? So it was something which you can do, while attempting the passage on your own. So let's read the passage, right? And if you notice, this is something which is very short. You should be able to do it quite well. Let's see. Okay, so I hope all of you are reading it, getting it right. I hope everybody is reading it. Okay, move on. Right. I hope all of you are getting the hang of things. The idea is, if you, so far what you have read is, there is a new trend to measure happiness and emotions, right? But rather than using it to find out the cause of the problem, it is actually being misused by big players, governments, and even big corporate houses to try and control you. Right, so you can even just look at this line. It will take you probably a minute to read it. and then I will quickly move on, right? So there are they are elaborate and intrusive cities such as Dubai. They drew up even more elaborate and intrusive ways of collecting data, right? So the examples that he takes you, that he gives, these are all examples of how uh, these things, these technology can actually intrude into your private lives, right? And they can be used to monitor people, they can be used to control people, shape opinions, right? Even he uses, the example of Facebook. Right. Look at the last line. So happiness indicators were once used as a basis to reform society, right? Challenging the obsession with, so it was used in a positive way. Now they are increasingly used as a basis to transform or discipline individuals. So this is the point, right? Now the next point, you also just take 30 seconds to read it, and then we will move on. Right. So if you notice here, he has even pointed out that uh, if there is lack of happiness, if there is something like depression, right, it has started to it has started to be seen as a defect in the individual, and not as a result of circumstances. So people are made to feel responsible for their own state of mind, right? So that way it does not solve the problem, it rather makes it worse, right? So that is what we need to be clear about. So but we won't get there by making the single often fleeting emotion the overarching goal. So again, this is like the this paragraph, this passage, I hope everybody understood. Let's move on to the questions. According to the passage, wearable technologies and social media are contributing most to something which is directly if not directly stated, connected to a data, right? So what should be the answer to this question? Right now, depression, most of depression is a thing of the past. No, they do not contribute to this. They contribute to how they can intrude, and they can be used to control people, right? So think of an option which best summarizes, or which comes the closest to what I was telling you. Disciplining individuals to be happy looks very close. This is the answer. It contributes most to happiness as a personal project. No, happiness is no longer a personal project. Big corporate houses, authorities, governments use it to monitor, and sometimes to even discipline, right? Or rather to mold the people into what they want, right? Making individuals aware, this is a very positive thing. So this is not the answer. Let's look at the next one. In the author's opinion, the shift in thinking in the 1970s, directly stated. So if you want, I will show you the part. What was the shift of thinking in the 1970s? The shift in thinking in the 1970s was this, right? Since the 1970s, the shift was depression has come to be viewed as a cognitive or a defect in the individual, and never a consequence of circumstances. So mentally, people who suffer from depression, so it was seen as their own issue, not a result of the situations. So let's see. If you read the part which we focused on, you will understand very clearly that the best answer is D. It introduced greater stress. This is like the result, as they were expected to be responsible for their own happiness. So the problems like depression, right, or lack of happiness, right, it was seen as a problem that originated in the individual itself. So that means the problem is yours, deal with it. So that way it would definitely it would, it would not reduce the problem, but would heighten the impact on the individual suffering from the problem. So the best answer is D. Everybody got the point, I think. Okay, Subhashish, at least one person is here, I hope. Okay, now Subhashish, did you notice it was the part mentioned in 1970? It was not B. It was not even related. This is the part. This is the part. This is the part which you refer. Read it again. All of this simply escalates the sense of responsibility each of us feels for our own feelings, with it the sense of failure when things go badly. So depression is not a result of circumstance according to the thinking. Depression is a result of your own issues. So if you suffer from depression, it adds to your problem rather than reduce it. So the best answer should be 7. The best answer should be D. Everybody got it? Right. Now let's look at the 8th question. So at last 2 people have responded, at least 2. Okay. Let's see. So what about the 8th question? The author's view would be undermined by which of the following research findings? Undermined means would be proved wrong. What is the author's view? The author's view is very large. If you summarize, let me tell you, if I summarize, he's saying that happiness indicators, right, indicators of emotions, it is emerging. It was used as a good thing in the beginning, but it is now, it is measured and it is used by corporate houses or even governments or authorities to monitor and sometimes even mold and discipline individuals to the detriment of the individuals only. So you should prove this wrong. Undermining is what would prove it wrong, right? A proliferation of gyms that are collecting data on customer well-being, this does not undermine, it only highlights the problem. It gives you more examples of what the author is saying, right? So this would support it, right? There's a definitive move towards the adoption. If people are shifting towards it, right, it does not undermine the author's view. The author's view is that it is being misused by, rather than used positively, it is being misused to some extent by authority. So even B is not the answer. What is the best answer? If you notice, the best answer here is D. Stakeholders are moving away from collecting data on the well-being of individuals. What the author says is exactly the opposite of this. That stakeholders, meaning people who have people who call the shots, right? People who are affected. In short, it could be the governments, could be corporate houses, right? So these stakeholders, they are moving away from collecting data on the individual so what the author was telling you is that nowadays data is collected on a large scale and used, right, to mold and shape people, and these says no, nobody is doing it, or people are slowly giving it up. This is the opposite of what the author is saying. So the answer should be D. 8th answer is D. Everybody is clear, right? Let's look at the 9th question. I hope everybody is clear with the 8th one. 9th. Okay. Now this part of the passage, you can answer it by referring to a particular part. Remember the part where he mentions economists, right? So from the passage, we can infer the author would like economists too, right? I will let you read the part and then we will quickly come to it. The part is this. Economists have spent most of the 20th century ignoring psychology, positive or otherwise. But today, there is a great deal of emphasis on how happiness can shape global economies, right? Or on a smaller scale, successful business practice. So he's saying economists have spent a lot of the 20th century ignoring psychology, but there is a shift on how happiness can be, but things are changing, and that is what he's saying. So what would he like the economist to do? Best answer. Okay, Vipul Sharma, is this answer that you're giving? Is it the answer to question number 8 or is it to 9? If it is to 9, if you say in 9, the answer is C. Incorporate psychological findings into the research cautiously. This is exactly what he wants, right? Cautiously, because not everything can be 100%, planted into, psychological, can be 100%. Psychology cannot be 100% implanted into economists. You'll have to use it according to the requirements. So he says, if you remember, economists have always neglected, but now it is being increasingly used. So that is what he wants. It is a, that's what he wants to indicate. Everybody is clear with this, I hope. Right. Now, work closely with neuroscientists to understand human behavior. This is too extreme. Right. 8, and if you look at B is irrelevant, and D, correlate measures of happiness and economic indicators. Now, this is something which he does not, which is not relevant to what the author would want economists to do. Right. Okay. 9, the best answer was C. Right. So 9, best answer was C. So I hope everybody understood. The best answer is C for 9. Clear hai? Right. So Subhashish Vipul got the answer correct. Let's see what about 10. According to the author, what is Dubai? Right. So there was a part which was mentioned about Dubai in the passage. If you want, I will show you that part and you can easily answer. As I was telling you, when you do it in the exam, what you're required to do is, if you're required, you need to refer to the part. But referring does not mean answering, reading the passage from the beginning again. You will know where was Dubai mentioned, read only that part, scan it, scan, and quickly you can easily confirm the answer. So what should be the answer to 10? According to the author, what did he say about Dubai? Let's see. I will tell you the part which is relevant. So this is where he mentions Dubai. Cities such as Dubai, which has dreamt to become the happiest city, dream up ever more elaborate and intrusive ways of collecting data on well-being. Right. So CCTV cameras are planned to be used to monitor facial expressions in public space. So Dubai is using elaborate and intrusive ways of collecting data on well-being. One such example is plan to use CCTV cameras to monitor facial expressions. So if this is the case, what should be the best answer? Tell me your answer. Subhashish thinks the answer for question number 10 is D. Is it on the way to becoming one of the world's happiest cities? The part which I told you, is it something which says it has pledged to become, but is it on the way? It has pledged, meaning it has vowed that it will become, but does it mean it is on the way to become? No. So what should be the answer? Subhashish, be very careful. Dubai has pledged to becoming the world's happiest city, one of the world's happiest city, but does it mean that it is on its way to become? No. So eliminate that. Right. Focus rather on the other part. Where he says elaborate and intrusive use of technology to measure happiness. Example, they plan to use CCTV cameras, right? So Subhashish, yes, the answer is A, correct. So develop sophisticated technologies to monitor its inhabitants' states of mind. The example of that, CCTV camera, right? And how he says intrusive technologies are being used, right? Now, if you notice, if you are careless, right, you might not, not be able to, you might not be able to answer the question, right? So with that, we come to the end of the session. I hope all of you understood, right? And before we end, let me quickly tell you, something about the courses. This is something which you can see. CAT 2021. There's a batch which started on the 19th of October for CAT 2021, right? And CAT 2020, there's a boot camp. CAT 2020, there are previous year question courses, right? There's a special course. These are the courses which you can actually think of, right? And you also, I hope you also know about the green card, right? Green card gives you access to online, it gives you access to mocks, right? So practice mocks for different types of papers, right? And last but not the least, if I tell you about myself, I'll tell you, when I reach that particular part. So these are the faculty who will be taking your classes, right? You can see the scores, right? And this is me, right? And in fact, if you notice, everybody is a proven performer in his or her own field. So that is what we have to be looking at, right? So these are the faculty who will be taking your classes. Okay, so that's it, everybody. Have a nice day. I will see you according to the schedule again. Thank you.